Hi, my name is Thomas Walters. I'm Deputy Chair of the Democratic Alliance's Federal Council. On my left-hand side, we have the Democratic Alliance Mayoral Candidate, Cllr Mpho Phalatse, and on my right-hand side, we have the Chief Whip of the Democratic Alliance in the Gauteng Legislature, Mr. Moriarty. And I'm going to kick right off. Coalitions and the possible makeup of coalitions post the November 1 election has become a hot topic of debate across the political spectrum. The DA has made it abundantly clear that it will under no circumstances enter into a coalition with the EFF. To be clear, there will be no DA coalition with the EFF. There will be no working relationship with the EFF. There will be no voting arrangement with the EFF. We are fundamentally two completely different parties which are moving in completely different directions. The DA leader has made it clear, and we repeat today, there will be no DA and EFF cooperation after this election. The reason we are here today is to warn voters that by voting for Action SA, they could well be opening the back door for the EFF. What we will show you is how Action SA has a host of ex-DA members who colluded with the EFF and who were no longer at peace with the DA that sees South Africa's future as a battle between the ideas of the DA and the EFF. This is not an election gimmick or a bout of mudslinging. It's a serious wake-up call for all those voters who believe that Action SA will not turn around after November the 1st and jump into bed with the Red Berets. Herman Mashaba recently said that he would not go into coalitions without first consulting the voters. A bit of a fudge. Well, we can tell you that in 2017, Mashaba, as a DA member, used his position as Johannesburg mayor to lobby for the EFF to be given the mayorship of Metsimaholo. He proposed giving away a municipality to the Red Berets to manage in exchange for support somewhere else. It must be noted here that the DA did not bend to his will, and eventually he left. The DA is not in the business of releasing its internal information, but we have a redacted version of a letter, the relevant paragraphs of which the press present may read for themselves, in which Mr. Mashaba says to the DA Federal Executive, and I quote, A, whether we like it or not, the EFF is a strategic partner of the DA to save South Africa. We can't do it on our own. Clear fact. I close the quote. Mr. Mashaba clearly sees the EFF as a partner, not a danger to the future of South Africa. EFF policies would take South Africa down the road to ruin, but Mr. Mashaba sees them as a partner. I open another quote. B, my personal view is that if we don't support them in this matter, I then don't see why they must support us somewhere else. We would have demonstrated to them and some people of this country that we are an arrogant party that does not respect other political parties. It would be about narrow DA principles. I close the quote. Mr. Mashaba here clearly does not think the DA principles such as the rule of law or the protection of private property matters. Furthermore, it shows his willingness to do whatever it takes to be in the good books of the EFF. I open another quote. I would like to close by appealing to us to use this EFF arrangement in Metsimaholo to strengthen our relationship with them and our other coalition partners. EFF is going to rely on us to assist them to succeed. I close the quote. Mr. Mashaba clearly articulates his desire to see the EFF succeed, while the DA wants the EFF to fail so South Africa can succeed. Later, and 2 years later, Action SA's John Moody, while still at the DA in 2019, tried to convince the Democratic Alliance Federal Executive to give the EFF 2 senior positions of government in Johannesburg. To quote the minutes of that meeting, I open the quote, the Gauteng leader, Mr. John Moody, proposed that the party offer the EFF 2 positions on the Mayoral Committee, this is in Johannesburg, and noted that it's unlikely that voters will notice or remember said appointments as MMCs are not well known. I close the quote. The DA did not bend to his will nor the will of Mr. Mashaba, and he left to join Action SA and is now on their list to be a Johannesburg councillor. At this stage, I hand over to Mike Moriarty.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I think what we see here, Thomas, is that it's clear that Mashaba's party and its leadership believe that the EFF is a crucial partner in the future of South Africa. And voters in this election do have the right to know whether the party that they're considering voting for will allow their vote to push the EFF into positions where it will govern. Why does this matter? Well, it's because the EFF is a threat to our country. And it would appear that Mashaba and his colleagues have blinded themselves to the consequences of their affection to the EFF. Because in an EFF world, South Africa would be divided along racial lines, and races would be pitted against one another. For their own narrow interests, the EFF would see our country crumble, divided and burn, and that we would all be at each other's throats. The EFF, as you know, want to see property and possessions of South African people taken away, especially land. The EFF is coming for your land, your house, your apartment. You will just be a tenant at their will. They're coming for your mother's house, your father's house, and your children's homes. And the EFF will stop at nothing to take what they want and control who gets what. And they will even use violence and chaos to get this. Worse still, the EFF is coming for your pensions, your medical aid, and your investments. They want to bring everyone down to the same impoverished common denominator. And so it's a mystery that Mr. Mashaba, who is a published and celebrated capitalist, would see himself in a situation where he's quite happy to turn a blind eye to all of this and take the votes of people that would otherwise admire him. But unfortunately, they would admire him at their peril, because these would be the consequences. Because the EFF is not some fashionable social media revolution. They're a very real and growing threat. Make no mistake, the rise of the EFF is a threat to everything South Africa is built on: a constitution, the rule of law, and a free market. And that's why, as we've clearly stated, under no circumstances will the DA work with the EFF after this election to achieve any governance outcome. Our belief is that everything possible must be done to stop the EFF taking up seats in any government. It was therefore unfathomable that a while ago there was a suggestion that the DA should have helped the EFF to take over a government and to allow the EFF to elect an EFF mayor and run an EFF government in a situation, by the way, where in that particular council they only had 18% of the vote. The story of the Joburg-led Mashaba administration is simple. He actually could not face down the EFF. And unfortunately then, he gave the EFF in very real terms, tacitly, to Johannesburg. The EFF controlled Mayor Mashaba, and he lost rationality and did as the EFF instructed. And what we reveal today in this particular redacted letter, Thomas, shows the intention of a person who saw no need to limit the EFF, none whatsoever. Instead, effectively gave the EFF power and prominence. And unfortunately, what the picture that you see in the public is one of Mr. Mashaba being an EFF acolyte, both socially and politically. The letter also reveals that it was not a question of governing Johannesburg well, nor was it about service delivery to Mr. Mashaba. It was about building a power bond with the EFF, and eventually that was at the cost of values and principles. This revealing letter is also seen in the context of the AfriRent scandal, in which Mr. Mashaba and the EFF presided over the award of 1.4 billion contract to a company which then paid large amounts of money in an apparent kickbacks to Julius Malema via Mahuna Investments. The entire scandal smacked of Mr. Mashaba's government questionably giving a 1.4 billion rand contract to a company funding Mr. Malema. It smacked of this and had many signs to show it. The future of South Africa, as the ANC crumbles, is a choice, Thomas. It's a choice between a path between a DA future or an EFF future. And from what we have revealed today, it is clear that Herman Mashaba sides with an EFF future for South Africa. Thank you.
I will now hand over to Cllr Mpho Phalatse, our mayoral candidate in Johannesburg.
Thank you, Thomas. I want a stable and clean government in Johannesburg, and I will not pander to the whims of anyone who tries to destabilize the city. The choice for voters in Johannesburg, in Tshwane, in Ekurhuleni, and all of Gauteng is clear. You can vote for the EFF through proxies, or you can vote for the DA, which is a party that governs well without the EFF and gets things done on our own. The track record of the DA as a party of government is not to compromise our values and to deliver for residents at the highest possible levels. And beyond historic delivery facts, which are well known as markers of how we get things done, our DA governments are progressive, forward-thinking, and resilient. Where we govern, we're working to end load shedding. That is the most progressive local government plan anywhere in South Africa. The DA can do this because we govern well and we put people first. We don't need the EFF or any fascist party in our corner to deliver. I intend on being a mayor that embodies the principles of constitutionalism and the rule of law. A DA-led Johannesburg will deal decisively with land invasions across the metro. We've already promised in our campaign manifesto that we will set up a dedicated anti-land invasion unit to stop these invasions. A DA-led Johannesburg will ensure clean tender processes. Absolutely no party will have backdoor access to these processes to manipulate for their own gain. The DA will be the guardians of good, clean governance practices. All staff appointments will be done above board and in line with the necessary legislation. This is the taxpayers' money we're dealing with, and it will not be abused for cater deployment, hiring purposes for corrupt parties. This is how DA governments get things done, because government is about, it's about what you know, it's not about who you know. It's not about cozy relationships, favors, scratching each other's backs. Government is not handed to a party in one place to secure support in another place. We urge South Africa, do not let the EFF in via the back door. The DA is a shield against the EFF, and we will do this without fear or favor. We will stand up to the EFF at every turn because the future of South Africa depends on it. As the ANC crumbles, the battle going forward is between the EFF and the DA. These are the only two pathways, and only the DA can beat the ANC, and only the DA can protect you from the EFF. Thank you.
In conclusion, I would like to say that there will be a couple of likely responses from Mr. Mashaba. He will say that, and we heard this before in the media, we heard this refrain, he will say that he did not get support from his caucus in Johannesburg and was working in the best interest of the city. Clearly it's not the case. Yesterday's announcement from the Hawks shows that this was not the case, and his caucus was trying to keep good governance on top, and frankly he marginalized his caucus, and that's why he lost support. He will say he received support from the federal leadership to work with the EFF to get things done and budget passed. He never ever had the mandate to lobby within the DA on behalf of the EFF, which he clearly has done. He did that off his own bat to stay in power. He will say that this is a last-minute gimmick to smear him because we are scared of Action SA. We want a majority in Johannesburg. We do not want our voters to split the vote. Voters need to know what they are voting for. The ANC is weak and busy crumbling, and consolidating DA support will see us emerge larger than them. In a setting like that, one or two councillors from a small party that is open to collusion with people that are taking South Africa and Johannesburg in the wrong path can destabilize government, and we need stable government in Johannesburg more than anything else. It's obvious when you drive through the streets of Johannesburg, that is what is required. He will say that he was doing whatever it took to govern Johannesburg well, and he will say Johannesburg was governed well under his watch. The recent revelations about procurement irregularities and Hawks' investigation under his administration show that governance was not up to DA standards in Johannesburg. Mpho Phalatse will do better, and you would have seen the Democratic Alliance caucus in Johannesburg and the federal executive of the party actually keeping Mr. Mashaba in check. And there's a direct correlation between that and him leaving the Democratic Alliance. Thank you very much. We're open for any questions if there's anyone who wants to ask. No questions. Thank you very much for your time, and we appreciate the media attention on something proper. Thanks.